Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Let me start with your judicial reform package. To say that it has gotten a negative reception might be an understatement. Your own defense minister called for a pause in it. He was concerned about it hurting Israel's security due to so many reservists being upset about it. The Israeli public approval for you has plummeted. The most recent Channel 13 poll has 71% disapproving of the job you are doing. Even among your own Likud party members, more people have a negative view of your job than a positive. And late last week, the credit agency Moody's downgraded Israel's economic rating due to what it said was what reflects a deterioration of Israel's governance, as illustrated by the recent events around the government proposal for overhauling the country's judiciary. Given all of this, have you decided to rethink and pull back on some of your reform ideas?
Well, you loaded so many things, many of them incorrect, in your questions. I'll try to, how do you say that? Unpack that one by one. Okay. The first thing is that I look for a broad consensus on the judiciary. Every democracy, including your own, has continuous tension between the judiciary and the executive or the legislative. That's happening in America. It's happening in France. It's happening in Israel. It's a natural tension of trying to keep the balance between the three branches of government. And Israel is no different. In Israel, the last 30 years, there's been a growing arrogation by the Supreme Court of the powers of the executive and the legislative. We're trying to bring it back into a proper balance. But that obviously has concerns because democracy is based on the will of the majority, the will of the people is reflected in the government that is elected and the legislature that is elected, and protecting individual rights, the will of the majority and the rights of the minority. And how to balance that is something that we're working at now. It's not easy. I want to make sure the pendulum doesn't swing from an all-powerful judiciary, always independent, but not always all-powerful, that overrules the government or the parliament. But at the same time, I don't want the parliament overruling automatically every decision of the Supreme Court. So I've decided to take time out, try to get a balance between the opposing views, and there are strongly opposing views in both sides of our society, and I hope to reach this by consensus. I think that's actually the right thing to do, and I'm doing it.
How do you guarantee consensus here? Because if you do this by a party line vote, right, where the majority, it's only a majority government ends up doing this in the Knesset, you're making a radical transformation to essentially your judiciary with ideological, with a very divisive ideological majority that isn't reflective of the public right now. Why do that? So how do you create a consensus? Do you promise to only pass this if it can get 90 votes in the Knesset?
Well, first of all, I don't think your reflection of what is the public opinion is correct, but there are always these tendentious polls that we've just had a poll 3 months ago, and it's called an election. And in fact, what has happened in the last 3 months is that overwhelmingly, not only the parties that won, but right now the broad base of the Israeli public believes that we have to have these corrections in the judicial system. But I think we have to do it, pardon the pun, judiciously, because I think that that's the only way that these reforms will hold, because otherwise the next government will change it again.
Why don't you
call, want to strive
how about this?
For consensus. You realize, you know how difficult it is. You've been a republic, a democracy for 250 years, and you're still arguing about it. We've been a democracy for 75 years. We have, it's a tough job, but I think we can achieve it.
Let me ask you this. If this is what you want to do to the judiciary, you didn't say this in this detail, the public didn't know this. The beauty of what you could do, you could call a snap election. You could basically say, okay, I'm going to run on this. The public knows exactly what we're doing. Let's see, run on it. Give the public a chance to weigh in on the specific reforms. You could do that if you wanted to.
Actually, we did run on it, and my party's representatives talked about it at great length. And that's another misconception. But there's so many misconceptions. Here's one. I'll give you one. This is a right-wing government. This is the most radical, extreme conservative government, and so on. Okay, how many of your audience know that the Speaker of the Knesset, the Speaker of our Congress, okay, is gay? How many know that he was nominated by me? And how many know that he was overwhelmingly elected just a few months ago? Nobody knows that because it doesn't fit the bill. How many know that my government, we have 20% of Israel's citizens are Arabs. How many know that my governments actually invested in the Arab sector, in their social welfare and infrastructure and education, in transportation and so many things, more than all the previous governments combined? They don't know it because it doesn't fit the bill. There is so much misinformation about what is happening in Israel that is fed from Israel. Yeah. Political opponents, it's natural. They're feeding, the political opponents abroad, and so the picture is set. But that's not the real picture. Israel is a vibrant democracy, has been a vibrant democracy, and will remain a vibrant democracy. And the one who's most committed to that is me. I was educated in the United States in Philadelphia. I learned a lot about democracy in Philadelphia. I read Locke, I read Montesquieu, I read Madison, Hamilton, Jefferson, and I didn't just read them. I'm trying as best as I can to implement the principles on which I was raised right here in Israel.
Do you understand, though?
It's possible. It's not easy, and given the vilification, it's hard.
But do you understand why perhaps your opponents in the country just don't take you at face value about the judicial reforms? Because you yourself would benefit from these reforms due to your corruption trial and the ability perhaps to make this either corruption trial totally go away or be delayed. How can you lead this effort if you yourself may benefit from this effort? How do you make it credible to the public?
Here's another fib, another lie. That's just not true. My own legal proceedings, which, by the way, are crumbling. All these charges against me have been crumbling. It's interesting that the hostile press stopped covering it, stopped covering the trial the minute it began, because things are just crumbling one after the other. But be that as it may, it's important to understand the judges in my case have already been chosen. I've made it absolutely abundantly clear that the reform will not affect any judge who today or tomorrow in the future has to deal with my case. So my case is completely independent from this. And the thing that people have to understand is
the Knesset did change the incapacity law.
Wants judicial reform.
Right? They changed the incapacity law on the prime minister to make sure that if you're indicted, that wouldn't be cause for removal. Or excuse me, if you're convicted, that it wouldn't be cause for removal.
That actually is something that no, actually, that's not true. The important thing is that it actually would be a cause for removal. It's the charges that are not subject. Otherwise, you can charge anyone. Mm-hmm. You can have some politically appointed prosecutors. Justice Jackson said, a famous American jurist, he said, the power of a politically motivated prosecution, they can just remove anybody on anything. And therefore, in Israel, under the unanimous decision of the Israeli Supreme Court, you cannot remove a prime minister based on charges, that can be politicized. So that hasn't changed, and that is actually enshrined in law and in Supreme Court decisions. Look, the whole thing is there is an issue. It's a real issue. It affects many democracies sooner or later. Yeah. It's affected Israel because of the imbalance of the three branches of government. We're trying to bring it back in balance, but I think trying to bring it back into balance requires, at least for me as prime minister, of a democratic, fiercely and robustly democratic country called Israel, to try to do it in as broad an agreement as possible. And I'm definitely giving it a shot.
Do you accept that this has taken a toll on you politically, that the public doesn't like this? Do you accept the premise that the public is upset about this?
Oh, some of it is upset. You wouldn't know about the other side that wants to have the judicial reform, because their demonstrations are not covered. So yes, there's a divided country right now. I think when I look at the issues themselves, I find a lot more agreement on the specific items, which leads me to believe that we can achieve this. And by the way, one of the reasons that I'm confident in this is that the leaders of the opposition today, many of them suggested these very reforms, and in fact went even beyond the things that we're suggesting now. I think there's a basis of agreement. It's obviously highly politicized, but you want to extract the country from this kind of position. I remind you, Chuck, that look, I'm used to things. You remember an American president who said, "There they go again"? Well, when I was first elected in 96, 26 years ago, 27 years ago, I was accused of, I was cast as a warmonger. And that proved out to be completely false because my years in government as prime minister, 16 years, have been the quietest and safest in Israel's history. I was later cast as the obstacle to peace. People wrote these vast articles about it. And that proved wrong because I brought 4 historic peace agreements, of which I'm very proud. With
well, let me ask you about that tenure. 16
and this
years.
is the next one.
Yeah,
this is the next one.
You once said.
Please go ahead.
You once said 2 terms should be enough for an Israeli prime minister. Why'd you backtrack?
Yeah, I said. I didn't backtrack. I said if you had a presidential system, you could put term limits on the prime minister. There is no elected parliamentary democracy in which you have limitations on terms of service of the prime minister.
Oh, I know there's not there, but you yourself said
you only have that in presidential.
You yourself said that that if you can't accomplish your goals in your first term, you might accomplish them in your second, but you don't need any more time than that.
I was referring to a question on a presidential system, but if you want to know, I think I still have, and apparently the people of Israel think I still have many things to do. Block Iran's quest for the bomb, expand the circle of peace with other Arab countries, forge Israel's economy to bring it to much higher levels. I've made it a free market economy, but I think we have incredible potential. And all these things, and perhaps arrive at a consensual judicial reform. These are 4 big tickets. By the way, I have another 8, but I'm not going to take your time.
I hear you very quickly. President Biden has weighed in, concerned about the judicial reform. Do you believe this is impacting U.S.-Israeli relations?
No, I don't. I think President Biden has been a great friend of Israel. I've known him for 40 years, from the time he was a senator, through vice president, through president. I know his commitment to Israel's security. Friends can have disagreements on occasion, but I share with him the view that we should act, not only share the view, I'm actually acting on it, to try to reach a broad consensus as possible. I want to tell you one thing, Chuck. When I compare the degree of coordination between Israel and America on security matters, on intel, on cyber, economic cooperation, I mean, there's just no comparison to where this was 27 years ago. Today, I think Israel, I always say America is Israel's indispensable and by far the best ally. But I want to tell you, I don't think you have a better ally in the world than Israel, because Israel has become a great technological power and a great asset to the United States. And our cooperation, mutual cooperation, saves a lot of American and Israeli lives.
Speaking of our relationship, the damaging leaks that came out of the U.S. government and the U.S. military, one of those leaked documents indicated that Mossad, the Israeli version of the CIA, advocated for its members to protest the current government. Do you believe Mossad opposes your government?
No. God, no. I think that was, first of all, I value American intelligence a little more than that, and I think they probably know the truth. The truth is that the Mossad legal advisor said that under Israeli law, junior members of Mossad can participate in demonstrations, not senior members. That's, I think, what led to this misunderstanding.
Gotcha.
But no, I think the Mossad, the military, our internal security services are working hand in hand with me as Prime Minister to assure the security of the country, and they're doing a damn good job of it, too.
Well, Mr. Prime Minister, you promised me some long answers to my questions, and we got them today. I appreciate you coming on, as you always do, and you do answer all of my questions.
Your questions were longer in some cases than my answers.
That is a very fair critique.
Thank
you are correct. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll see you next time.